Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about one of our favorite topics that Evie and I talk about, which is a circadian rhythm and why circadian rhythm is so important to health. There's so many different reasons and a lot of ways that we can take this. I'll always ask Evie, like, when did you discover that circadian rhythm was like a thing we needed to pay attention to other than jet lag?
Yeah. I would say probably similar to what we talked about in last episode of, when I started doing morning routines and really getting into the healthy habits and building habits, it was around that time where I wanted to get out and go for a walk because I feel better when I get up and get moving. But then I learned more about circadian rhythm and how light exposure in the morning can really impact how the rest of your day goes. It can impact your sleep. And so then I started getting really interested in that. So I'd say it's been about 3 going on 4 years where I've paid attention to that and strategically been doing things for my circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's probably about the same. Like when I was flying as a professional pilot and previously it was really all about managing your time zones, managing jet lag, really paying attention to what could you do to help shift that kind of stuff so that you could be more of a human and less of a zombie. But when I got into, my own healing journey and discovered that there are certain biological cues that happen that are external to us in our environment that have a huge impact on our health, that's when I started learning about circadian rhythm. I also came across this article and conversation with a friend of mine, Christopher Kelly, and the term is Zeitgeber. Have you ever heard the term Zeitgeber?
I have not.
So Zeitgeber, it's a German term, and really that is the meaning of the word is defined as like external influence, right? These are the external influences. And Zeitgebers are basically biological rhythms, right? So these cycles that are related to our sleep or our waking, our mood, our cognitive performance, and it's all related to the body's internal clock. So there's a whole list of these different influences, like the seasons and temperature, right, can influence the way that our metabolism runs, for example, social interactions that we're having. So as a human, we tend to have social interactions during the day and less of them at night, unless, you're a grave shift person. Like, of course, all of this gets turned on its head. Exercise patterns, our eating and drinking patterns can cue certain things in the body, right? So our metabolism and the way that insulin works and leptin and ghrelin and all of those different hormones that happen with our hunger. But the most powerful one, light. And that's the one that just, I was kind of blown away because, of course, I didn't really understand how the different wavelengths that are present in different light tones, right? So if you think about a sunrise and a sunset, those are always going to have those warm light tones, as opposed to when the sun is totally at noon, it's kind of more of a bright white or blue tone to the light. Those different tones or wavelengths of light actually hit photoreceptors, not only in our eyeballs, but also on our skin, right? And can have a huge effect on all sorts of different things. And so that's where this whole Zeitgeber thing got really interesting for me, is light.
Same. I became so fascinated by that, of there are these natural cues, I call it free medicine, right? All around us that
so
I'm like, really, the light is what's going to tell my body like how much cortisol to produce, or how, what digestion could look like, or when to start going to sleep. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized like we have overcomplicated things because we've had these cues for so long, right? Before electricity, this was definitely way more natural for people. Like the sun is up, so we should be doing things, and the sun goes down, we should probably turn in and go to bed. So it was just really interesting to me as well, of like that this is so simple and overlooked, and but it plays such a big role in our health, and especially the circadian rhythm.
It does. And, most people think of circadian rhythm as the time that we go to sleep. And one of the things that I found really interesting when I was really digging deep into a lot of the different articles about it and some of the studies that have been published is, a lot of our hormones are on these internal circadian rhythm type clocks, but they need these external cues, these Zeitgebers. I love that word. It's so fun to say. These Zeitgebers to be able to trigger them, right? And so we think about sleep, that there is this, you can think of it as a clock or a timer that is instigated in the body with morning light, that approximately 12 hours later is when the body starts to produce melatonin. And so, I think it is kind of counterintuitive at first when you tell somebody, like you tell a client, like, first morning sunlight is great, it's going to help you sleep the next night. And they're like, what? How is that possible? But it's because that timer, that internal clock gets cued. And then all of a sudden they're able to, produce a little bit more melatonin. Now, this is assuming, of course, that they're not under a bunch of bright light at nighttime, right? We can get into that and talk a little bit about that. But yeah, these light cues are huge for the body. And I know you, Abby, you've also been experimenting with red light. Do you want to talk about the red light piece specifically and the red wavelengths and what you've learned about that?
Yeah, so I've been doing red light therapy. I first got into it because I started seeing a lot of products about it, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And, to be honest, I was like, this might be good for skin, just, vanity things too, of this might help some scarring of skin things that I have with acne and all that. And so I got into it with that. But then the more I learned about photobiomodulation, how it affects your mitochondria, and then I met someone locally to me here in Cincinnati who owns Midwest Red Light Therapy, and he taught me a lot about red light and how you can time it during the day. So ideally you want to be exposed to red light during the day because that's when we're also exposed to red light. But also red light comes from things like fire, right? So candles, if you light your house later on in the evening when the sun goes down, you have a fireplace or you have candles lit, that's going to be red light exposure too. So it's a lot more gentle. It's not as bright or stimulating as blue light, which is what we get usually, middle of the day, that noon sun you were talking about. So ideally you want to be exposed to red light when the sun is still out, but it can also be very efficient or very effective at regulating your circadian rhythm as well, because it can take away that big high stimulation from the blue light that you get during the day and help kind of bring your cortisol levels down, increase melatonin when you do it in the evening too.
Right.
And like we talked about with the light exposure in the evening, really trying to decrease the amount of blue light and really all spectrum of light in the evening. So you can use things like blue light blocking glasses, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I've also, with the red light, I've experimented with doing a red light bulb in my lamp. Yeah, so I've been doing that. It's just 2 nights of it, so I don't have a lot to go off of, but I will say that it definitely changes the environment of the room. Even though it's just one lamp that was lit, I still feel like that was a little too much light exposure, too much blue light because it was an LED light. So having that red light, that red kind of just light take over the room is really relaxing the evening. I've heard a lot of people do this with kids as well, and it can help them with their melatonin levels because they can sleep a lot better if they have more of that red light in the evening, that softer light versus that harsh blue light that comes from the light bulbs and LED lights that we're used to.
Yeah, exactly. I just happened to look at an Instagram feed, and Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I love her as a researcher and scientist, and she was talking about a research paper that just recently came out that studied blue light exposure in children and how it suppressed blue light or white light, right? Or normal light bulbs, the LED lights, that kind of thing, the stuff that's coming off of screens, like all of that is blue light exposure. That it suppressed melatonin production in children 98%. 98%. Like, can you imagine how different bedtime would be if, there were warm lights in the evening as opposed to screens and bright lights. And then you're trying to get these kids to go to bed, but they have zero melatonin, right? Because they're not producing it and they don't want to go to bed, right? But it can be a lot easier and a smoother transition. And when you talk about your red light bulb, I always think about the times when I'm outside or camping and we are around a campfire, right? There's this I don't know, it's almost like a meditative draw to just look at the fire and watch the fire and just relax. Like, that's such a soothing piece. And a lot of it has to do with these cues that's happening in the body, is that we're not looking at really bright light. We're just looking at these nice warm glows of fire or sunset or whatever that happens to be. And our body is starting to do the things that it was designed to do, like help us have really restorative sleep, which, you know, in turn will help us set up the day for a really nice response with our cortisol, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm excited to see what the next few weeks of doing that's going to bring, because I already wear blue light blocking glasses in the evening, but I'm interested to see if I have that light bulb in there. And, you know, I also got string lights too. So I actually, interestingly, you brought up the research with the kids. I bought those for my nephews for Christmas because one of them, he already wears blue light blocking glasses, which I think is so cute. He trained him early, talking about it. Yeah. And he was really interested. So he uses that if he's on his iPad in the evening.
Great.
But I'm going to be curious if they do this red light, if that also helps, because he does have trouble sleeping. You know, he's the kid who wakes up at 3 a.m. and wants to go sleep with mommy and daddy. So I wonder if that's going to be, you know, helpful. And so when I saw that, it was reassuring. I'm like, okay, this could probably be a good thing for him to have that red light in the evening and just that dimmer, softer light versus the harsh light that is on usually.
Right. Right. Yeah. Keep us posted how that goes, because I'm super curious to see what's happening with your own red lights. You know, my husband and I, we decided to get those hue lights that you can control the different colors off of.
Oh,
and
yes.
So we put those in our bedside lamps. And so we always have them set to some like orangey red type color when we're going to bed, so that, you know, we're cueing that way. And both of us actually have noticed that it's a heck of a lot easier to fall asleep when we switched the color of the lamps in our bedroom.
Very cool.
Getting up, right? I think a lot of my clients who are challenged with sleep and getting up early in the morning, or they have a little bit of what I call a shifted circadian rhythm, right? Where they're kind of doing the night owl thing and then sleeping in till 9 or 10 in the morning. And one of the things we start working on is shifting that to be closer and closer to the cycle of the sun. But just getting out first thing in the morning, like you and I can rattle off probably 5 to 7 different benefits of why that's so important. You want to take a stab at it and I'll fill in the rest?
Well, because like you said, I think of it as like a countdown, right? It sets the countdown of when your body will start to produce more of the melatonin, so you can start to unwind and get to bed earlier. So it helps your sleep. I think it sets the tone for it's time for the body to get up and get going. Cortisol production will increase, which we know that hormone helps us. You know, it's the hormone that helps with the alertness. It's also anti-inflammatory. So we want that to be at the appropriate levels at the appropriate times of the day. I mentioned in the other episodes, I personally like it because it helps me. It's a good time for me to kind of wash off like the night and the sleep and just get moving and kind of get those cobwebs out, so I can be alert during the day. What would you add to that?
I mean, getting outside and going for a walk first thing in the morning, it may not be circadian rhythm related, but you know me, I like to double dip whenever possible. So whatever I'm doing, I want to have multiple benefits, right? So you get some movement in, which is hugely important. Like start off the day with just getting steps in it. We're not talking putting running shoes on and going for a 5-mile run. Literally, like you can just walk around the block. And if you don't have that kind of energy, sit on your porch, drink a cup of tea or whatever it is in the morning, and just get that morning sun. I try to, even though it's winter, so sometimes in the winter, it's just my face, right? But I try and expose as much skin. So sometimes I'll like roll up my sleeves or whatever, expose as much skin to the sun, right? Because when we are not in that prime time, we're still getting some of those benefits of generating some vitamin D through that natural process that happens in our skin cells. And then fresh air and breathing, right? So just getting in some nice breath work or rhythmic breath in the morning is super helpful. And for the most part, I'm close to nature. So I'll go to the nearest park and do our walk in a park, or try and do it in a place that's surrounded by trees or something like that. So getting out in nature, it's also very helpful for the nervous system. So even though those aren't necessarily like circadian rhythm kind of things, they're still external cues that help our body work the best that it can from the environment, right? So those are a lot of different reasons that I like doing that morning walk.
I agree.
One thing that I learned just the other day, and this is my own like experimentation into intermittent fasting and really paying attention to blood sugar levels and that kind of thing, is that the circadian rhythm is also involved in our blood glucose modulation, right? And so we are more insulin resistant, meaning it takes a lot longer to burn off the calories that we eat after the sun goes down. And I just found that to be totally fascinating. Of once again, here we are with circadian rhythms, like everything is happening with in synchronization with the sun, right? And so we actually can metabolize food better when it's still light out. So those meals that are happening and being consumed after dark are going to take a lot longer to metabolize. And I found that really fascinating too.
That is really, really fascinating. I think if a lot of people stopped and thought about it, they'd be like, oh, well, I can see that, or I get that, or, I can see how that would apply to me. Now, again, it might not always be the case. Like some people can tolerate having meals later after dark, but it's interesting in like the late night snackers, right? Because I'm like, well, I wonder how much more of an effect that's having on you because you are snacking in the evening versus if you were to have those snacks in the morning, right? If that behavior was shifted earlier, I wonder if it would affect you the same as if it does in the evening.
Correct.
So it's just something to be curious about.
Yeah, something to play around with. How about mood? Have you ever been affected by mood and sunlight? Or lack thereof?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So definitely. I live in the Midwest. So winters can definitely be rough because we don't get as much sunlight as we normally do in the summer. The days are definitely shorter. I mean, when the sun goes down and is pitch black by 5 p.m., it's really, really hard to not be affected by that for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm a sunshine girl. I love the sun. I love the summer. So that's also, that would actually be another reason why I'm such a big proponent of going on morning walks and getting that natural light in the morning, because I do feel like that exposure is really helpful for me because I do benefit from that sunlight, and it makes me feel happy and joyful and more optimistic. And so when I get that first thing in the morning, that's going to set the tone for the rest of my day.
Absolutely.
Whereas if I don't get that, I have a little bit of a harder time, like getting up and get going and feeling really good and feeling really focused and energized. So I do like that. And I've noticed a correlation in the days where, there's been days where it doesn't look like the time has changed at all. Like it's cloudy in the morning and it just stays the same type of cloudiness all day. And you're like, is it still 8 a.m.? Like what? You have no sense of time at that point because the sun doesn't move the way it does. Yeah. And that will also affect my mood as well.
Absolutely.
So
and
I'm definitely influenced by it.
Oh, I'm so influenced by it. So I grew up in Colorado, and, Colorado's known for having, 340 some odd sunny days a year. Right. And went to university in Bellingham, Washington, which is pretty much overcast for 9 months out of the year. And we didn't even really fully understand seasonal affective disorder or SAD in the way that we do now, and how we are so affected from a cognitive mood standpoint. And man, that first year of university was hard. Like I was not motivated to do things. I wasn't motivated to get outside. I just wanted to stay in, and definitely dealing with depression for the first time in my life. And I couldn't figure out, is this because I'm away from home? Like, what is going on here? And then that summer, that first summer after that first year, I came to California to help out with a family project. And lo and behold, sunshine, man. I was just overjoyed and energized and just having the best time. And I couldn't get myself to go back. So I did the long haul and, changed universities and did the out of state tuition thing at community college and all that stuff. But now, like, we've got such wonderful resources to understand what's happening when we go to shorter daytime periods, right? In the winter here in the Northern Hemisphere, and in the summer in the Southern Hemisphere. And we can get full spectrum lamps to help us with that. In fact, I've got one in my window that I use in the mornings, right? Because I rise before the sun comes up typically. And so I will turn that on and get full spectrum light with a full spectrum lamp, and use that a lot during the winter months. And it makes a huge amount of difference, you know?
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, when you wake up and it's dark and it's cold and you know the sun won't be up for like another hour and a half, it's
Right.
really hard to get going and start your day.
It is. And the power of light is so amazing that instantly I feel a difference when I turn that lamp on. And I didn't think that it would be so instant, but I can literally feel kind of like this relief. It's almost like when you're waking up and it's still dark, like you said, and you know, it's a good hour and a half or so before the sun is actually going to come up. It kind of feels like this weight. It's the same feeling I used to get having to get up at 2 a.m. to go show up for a flight, an early morning flight. Like, it's just like, oh, you're just so,
Yeah.
It takes so much to get moving. You turn that light on and it feels much better. And, you know, we even have devices that you can use to give yourself light exposure to help yourself adjust to jet lag, right? So if you're crossing the Atlantic and you're trying to adjust to jet lag, you can do these little like light doses with intense blue light to help with that circadian rhythm shift, because that's really what you're doing when you're changing time zones. You're shifting your entire circadian rhythm, and it takes a couple days to figure that out, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's really cool that we can use that. It's, again, a free medicine, free resource to adjust and yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess really for people who are listening, it doesn't mean that you have to do things the way that we're doing. Not everybody's going to have the luxury of being able to get up and immediately go for a walk. You know, they might be getting kiddos ready for school and packing lunches and that kind of thing. So it's really about taking what you hear and picking those things that you think you could implement pretty easily, or making a small shift, because you know, most of these things that we do in health and wellness, like, we're not changing everything all at once. And you hear one topic about circadian rhythm and all of a sudden it's like, okay, dinner's got to be done by 5. And then we got to all get up with the sunrise, you know, and that's such a hard change to do in a household. So really it's picking one of those things, even if it's buying a red light bulb. That's like a super simple way of doing it, or blue light blocking glasses, right? So that we can protect ourselves from too much blue light exposure during the evening hours, or even during the day. Like, a lot of us are on computers all day long, right? And we're getting blue and green light exposure from the computers, and you can get mild blue light blocking. So these are prescription glasses that I have on right now, and they have mild blue light blocking in them, specifically more for like glare control, or I can't remember the name of what they called it, but it definitely blocks a little bit of that blue light. And I can tell the eye strain is less, the fatigue is less when I'm using those kinds of things. But then when I'm done for the day, I shift into the glasses that are darker, the oranger ones, right, that are blocking the blue light. And that helps a lot. So
definitely.
Yeah. Have you gotten everybody in your household to do blue light blockers?
So Danny, my husband, he has not done blue light blockers, but he understands that we turn the overhead lights off. You know, basically the cue is when the sun goes down, the lights go down too. So overhead lights go off, turn lamps on. When we had the Christmas tree, that's really nice, because that would be a better light source than having the overhead lights. I wear my blue light blocking glasses. But he is on board with the red light bulb. So that'll be interesting to see if he notices a change too, because he's like, oh, I don't need blue light blocking glasses in the evening, but I'll be curious to see what he thinks. He does wear them during the day at work because he works on a screen all day. So, and he has noticed that he feels better just in terms of even like eye strain, headaches. So yeah, he's on board, but we'll see what changes he notices versus the one that I noticed too.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think for me in my household, I was the one who struggled with insomnia for a long time, right? And I started using blue light blocking glasses, and almost within 2 or 3 days, I was able to start falling asleep within a few minutes instead of 30, 45, an hour.
Yeah.
That's how much it affected me. And Jeremy, my husband, he started wearing blue light blocking glasses, but he didn't really notice a difference because he was already, hitting the pillow and falling asleep. So for him, it wasn't an immediate feedback or enough of a feedback to make it a long-term behavior change. But he is really open to having the lower lights and the different kinds of colors in our lamps at night. And that really helps him relax. So he notices the relaxing piece more than the insomnia piece like I did.
Yeah.
So,
I know. It's interesting to see how everyone is affected differently. I think there's benefits for all. It's just, again, if you're starting out with, that's not even a problem for you in terms of falling asleep, then yeah, you might not notice a big difference with the glasses, but you might notice it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So we'll include some of the links in the show notes to the lamps and the light bulbs and maybe some blue light blocking glasses and that kind of thing. Any final takeaways that you want to say, Evie?
I think just, again, like Terea said, take a little piece of what you heard today. You don't have to uproot your entire routine. You don't have to go for a 35-minute walk in the morning. Do what you can and just get curious on how this is going to impact you, and know that these things are available to you for whenever you're ready to implement them. And it's a fun experiment to see what you notice when you start implementing these things.
It is. And if I could, I would put a link to the sun in the show notes. But I can't. But it is absolutely free. Like you said, I mean, that's one of the coolest things about it, is that it's free. It's available to us. There is no economic limitation to allowing you to get out and just take advantage of the sun. And like I said, it doesn't have to be a walk. It can be literally sitting on the porch with your tea in the morning or whatever you're drinking in the morning and just absorbing that light as much as you can without sunglasses. I should have said that. We want naked eyeballs doing this, right? Because we actually do want the light to go into the eyes. And because the sun is so low on the horizon, we're not going to have the same effect with the cells at the back of the eyes as we would during the day. So you don't necessarily, or higher points of the day, you don't necessarily need to have sunnies on in the morning. So it's actually better if you don't. So yeah, super cool. Well, thank you so much, Evie, for joining me, and we'll see all of you guys at the next episode.
All right. Have a great one.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Wildly Optimized Wellness Podcast. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, stop playing the whack-a-symptom game, start testing to get better guidance, you can find more about Terea at TereaRodriguez.com, and you can find Evie at holisticallyrestored.com. Want a peek into what it's like to work with us? Come join us at our Optimized Wellness community. You can find the invitation link in the show notes below. And if you have a question for the show, you can submit your question under the podcast section of TereaRodriguez.com. Finally, if you found something helpful in this episode, don't forget to leave a review, hit that follow button, or share it with a friend. They're going to love that you thought of them. Until next time, see you outside.